Good morning, Todd Darcy from Stutter Fox Studios. Thank you for being on the channel.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I've been looking for an RTS for a long time. My fan base basically was like, hey, we know you've been looking for an RTS. Check this out, DG. We see something called Falling Frontier. It's explained as a real-time strategy game that combines classic RTS-style gameplay elements with a number of innovative features, including logistical gameplay and physics-based destruction in a large-scale star system. So I wanted to get more into the gameplay, dig in for people who are curious. I have a lot of people in my community who sent me in questions that want to know more about the game. And I think the first thing that we all wanted to know was if we're going to get a campaign, or is this complete skirmish mode, or is this both?
Yeah, sure. Good place to start. So upon release, the plan is for a skirmish mode. That's what I'm committing to. Campaigns take a long time to make. There's a lot of scripting, a lot of UI text. I am planning to do one depending upon how successful the game is. If it's really successful, then yeah, a campaign's coming.
Okay, good.
But the initial offering is going to be a skirmish mode.
We know we pick a lineage, right? You've got lineages.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, which are basically factions.
Why the different lineages?
So for me, I'm a massive fan of sci-fi. I love the lore behind sci-fi. And even if it's a ridiculous sci-fi, I want it to be believable. I want it to feel believable, just whether that's a game or a film or whatever. I want them to sell me on that world. So the lineage is a part of that. It does have gameplay components to it. One of the foundational pieces of it is it's a backstory. It's who might represent you best, or who you want to see rise to the top. It does have gameplay implications, such as buffs and debuffs, and also starting tech as well. So it does change things up a bit, and I can give you a really good example of that.
Okay, great.
So the like lineage for series. So they are great at adapting to low gravity worlds. So that has implications on your population, where they prefer to be, where they will basically produce the most of
they'll thrive, right?
Yeah, basically.
So there is that gameplay where you have units that are producing resources on different planets.
So there's three primary resources to build everything, but there's also other resources that ships consume, which are separate to those as well, and we can talk about those too. The primary resources are fuel, ore, and credits. Well, there's also people. People are also a resource.
Okay.
But it's not something that is produced from a ship action. It is produced from reproduction on a planet or a moon. So any celestial body. Ore and fuel, they get mined at asteroid fields, which you would have seen in some of the videos.
Yes.
They can also be mined on planets. One of the upgrade paths for planets is to actually deep core mine that world, which is fine. It means you get stuff fast, but the implication to that is that you will disturb the gravitational structure of that world, and any structure in orbit could actually be destroyed. So it could deorbit.
So there's effects to mining the planet itself. Okay, this is not a graphical interface when we're talking about mining a planet. This would just be like something that you could click into that would be like, okay, mine this planet or inhabit this planet.
Correct.
And then and then those resources get shuttled into, like, I'm imagining you've got like a key setup where it's showing you like your total intake of fuel, your total intake of ore, correct? Like you've got like a
to a degree. Resources in Falling Frontier are physicalized. So what that means is that you don't have a single bar where you've got all of your ore, fuel, people, things like that. And so what you have is what you have are logistical structures. So a good example of one of these is a spaceport that is in orbit. You have supply depots, you have refineries. Each one of these store resources, and you've actually got to physically move them around through trade routes,
Okay.
which can be blockaded. Resources can be destroyed through structures being destroyed, transports
This is
being
cool.
destroyed.
I like this.
Yeah, so there's all those kind of implications that actually ties into many mechanics, in the sense that if so if you are losing
Yeah.
effectively, you can change the style of gameplay up and be more of a guerrilla fighter, and then go for supply depots, stuff like that.
Right.
Stop the war coming to you
By attacking the
by
routes. By attacking
correct.
routes. I love it. I love it. Which would
Yeah.
get into the implications that I saw with. I mean, you're talking about in Steam. We see that it includes logistical gameplay. This would be the logistical
Yes.
gameplay, I'd imagine. And then also
That's one
when
part
we
of it.
were
Yeah.
and that's very fun for me. Like I'm an industrial kind
Mm.
of player normally, and I'm also like a pirate on the side. So like that plays right into like my bad boy and good boy. Like I'm like, okay, good. I can do both things at the same time.
Yeah.
I like the fact that I saw, and I don't know how deep the gameplay gets here, but I would imagine it
Mm.
would play into it. It was like a 3D imaging, like sonar or radar, or you know what there was like a scanning feature
Yeah.
that I
The
liked.
recon
So
station. Yeah.
okay, and is that limited to just the station, or are there units? Are there ship units that do this as well, or just the actual stations?
Mm. At the moment, it's just the stations. That's
Okay,
where I'm planning on leaving it.
okay,
Um, uh, a big theme about Falling Frontier is risk versus reward,
mm-hmm.
and choice and consequence.
Yes,
Um, it I like to think of it as a very intentional game,
mm-hmm.
that you just can't be what's the word? Can't be flippant um,
The
about
choices will
what you're doing.
matter. Right, right,
They will
like
matter. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
yeah, so the recon stations are really important, and they're very expensive. Actually, everything is really, really expensive. So
Good.
losing anything hurts, but it should also
Yes,
look cool.
yes,
So that's kind of
yes.
the, well, I lost something, but it looks cool
Right,
being
right.
destroyed.
Damn it, I lost it.
Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
but in the case of recon stations,
Mhm.
they are very powerful, but they can also be your Achilles heel. So, um, a big thing about Falling Frontier is line of sight.
Mhm.
And so you can, if you suspect you know where your opponent is, well, then it's smart to basically build structures on the dark side of a planet,
Mhm.
so then they can't see it.
Right.
But then you can't see them. But then you might build a recon station out of the blind spot, and then basically check for a certain area of space. And the recon stations can go from a very focused beam that's very long to a very short beam that's a full 360 degrees.
Okay.
So that's a choice. Like, do
Okay.
you want to focus, but you got to
Right.
be pretty sure where where um where your opponent is, or do you want to be a bit more generalized and kind of look closer to home? I could probably just come in here. Now this UI is very temporary. It looks
Mhm.
temporary,
Okay.
but this is sort of like a dummy object that a player can sort of use to um, plan their recon stations.
Like a station or a
Again,
position.
yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
you can basically say, oh, okay, I've
What's it look
so
like
I can build
around?
one. I can build one here. Um, I can change the size of it, the angle, and then I can kind of play around to sort of see where it's going to actually reach, what it can and can't see, based upon where I think the opponent is. And just a
Is
couple
this
of
something that
comments
is
flying around.
static or dynamic? Does this change, or will this always be that way when you're placing it?
Just what do you mean? So
So
this
like
no.
through
So
research skills, are you able to like broaden that, or is that going to be like the entirety of when that area is placed or the station is placed there? Will that be its line of sight for the remainder of the experience?
you can change it at any time.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
But again, risk versus reward, costs,
Costs. Ah,
consequence, choice,
love it.
consequence. So
Yeah.
so to actually change that, so to change the beam, to change the orientation,
Mm-hmm.
the ships have little thrusters on them, and you'll actually see them rotating around, but they have to turn themselves offline. So they first have to go offline. They then have to rotate, which takes time, and then they have to power that component back up, which takes time. So, I mean, at the moment, it takes like 15 seconds. It's for like testing purposes,
Right.
but in reality, that could take 10 minutes. Recon stations also have a couple of different modes. They've got active and they've got passive. So it works a bit like a sonar. So passive only picks up jump signatures. So if a ship jumps out or it jumps in to the line of sight of a station, of a recon station, then it will show up as like a ping.
It'll ping up. Mm-hmm.
It'll ping. But you can also do an active scan, but that gives your position away to basically everything.
Oh, I love it.
And not just the station, but also the objects that belong to you around the station, that are close to the station.
And range is indicative of like there's obviously like a range to these. Is this going throughout the entire map system, or is this limited to does this have a limit to the length, I guess, of the scan?
Yeah, there's a limit. There's a limit.
Okay.
It doesn't go end to end.
Okay.
But that's one of the many things you can improve through research.
Okay.
So yeah, a whole range of different things. Pretty much every structure is going to have some kind of upgrade path. That, well, actually, I shouldn't say upgrade path. Some do have upgrade paths, whereas others have improvements that are unlocked via research.
Okay, and the research itself, it costs time only, or are there other resources like ore or fuel dedicated towards the upgrade, or is it just time?
Time and money.
Time and credits. Okay, gotcha. Okay, and are you calling them credits? Is that what you're calling them, credits in the?
Yeah, I'm calling them credits. I'm doing the classic sci-fi.
I was wondering. That's why I was asking. I saw you smiling there. Right.
Yeah, I might change it.
We should make a name up right now. Chads.
50,000 chads for a station.
Oh shoot, man! Maybe. All right, so let's get back to the gameplay. Okay, so we saw I really like this because what you're explaining to me is the risk versus reward seems to be an element that's missing a lot in most RTS games, and I like this. I like the path that you're taking. One thing that we're really big onto here, the AI that you're implementing in Falling Frontier, is it going to be like a learning adaptive AI? Is it going to be this? Are we going to expect the same movements from units when in certain scenarios, or is there going to be like a slight variation? I understand that there might be a repetitive factor of it, but is it learning?
I wouldn't necessarily say, learning when you're speaking about AI is a difficult thing, because that usually implies some kind of neural network of some kind that it's keeping track of a whole bunch of things, but not always the case.
Like in chess programs, like how certain AI and chess programs will like start to know its opponent and then make a move predictive based upon past performance.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. So I'm creating the AI from scratch, just like so many other things with the game.
Right.
So at the moment, I've only got a fairly rudimentary seek and destroy
Okay.
AI
Okay.
in the game that does patrols. It flags worlds as hostile and will try to send a patrol or a fleet. Well, I call them
Mm-hmm.
flotillas
Mm-hmm.
to try to clear that space. But it doesn't always do that. It can make decisions between a few different choices. It doesn't weight those choices at the moment. It's just
Okay.
random, but the AI is going to have goals. And so based upon the goals, different decisions might be weighted in a certain direction.
Okay.
But that's currently not in the game. Pretty much all AI is cheap because either they would be not efficient or they would be so good that you could never beat them. Um, the thing I want to do with Falling Frontier is that I don't want the AI to ever know where you are without using the same gameplay
The same
mechanics that the
mechanics.
player
Good.
uses.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's one of the reasons I was asking that question
Yeah.
as well.
It currently makes decisions now, and that's my design goal for the AI, that it will always make decisions based on um, based on what it knows about the player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, that's a really overarching design decision, just because the game space is huge and I want there to be a certain a certain element of cat and mouse to a degree. If that gameplay comes around, I don't want the AI to ever be told where the player is. So a really good example of that right now, even with a really simple AI, is that a player could control three different worlds, and the AI has basically found all three. It's sent sort of probing uh, probing missions to just sort of attack stuff. And perhaps the player's got a total of 8 ships, but the AI's only found 3 ships. So that's what it thinks you've got, right? So it's it is not going to send 12 ships against you, because that's over committing and it's going to actually leave itself defenseless. So it will send what it thinks it actually needs to basically take out the player, and it might consolidate its forces against a single target, or it might go against all three.
Okay.
But the chances are that if it goes against all three, which the player can't predict, um, is that the player will have to then commit extra forces, which then allows the AI to find more ships, which then in turn goes, hey, the player's got way more ships. I better build some more ships. So that's how it works. Now, it's really primitive.
It's rudimentary because you're
And
just, I mean, like, really,
yeah,
that's another thing too, is like, how many people in Stutterfox Studios are there?
just me.
Yeah, right.
Just
So
me.
it's just you that's creating this, and that's like very, very. I have to say, like, for what I've seen, that's super ambitious. But it seems like to me, when I'm watching the footage that you're putting out here, like your heart's really into it, and I'm seeing what you're creating, and we're all loving it. Like every time I put on a
Thank you.
new update, we're just like blown away by the sounds and the looks, the feels. And so, like, I'm really rooting for you, man. Like, I really want this to
Thanks, appreciate
succeed.
it.
Yeah,
Me
I mean,
too.
like,
Me too.
I think that's so admirable that like you're one guy, you're like creating everything that we're watching, and I'm just like, wow. We already know, like, you're telling us, like, okay, if this is going to be successful, some great revenue, some great income from this, then I will get deeper. I would imagine that you could put this in as like a future content that people could download, or would you attach a price to it? Would this be like people that got in would be able to get like the download free? Would you put another price? I mean, obviously you're working on more content, so I'd imagine there'd be some price. Have you even thought that far down the line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So how would you
I've thought that
introduce?
far.
So would you introduce more content, and then what would you think price range would be like if going into like another stage of Falling Frontier?
So in terms of future content post release, there's a couple of well, there's one game studio that I adore for the way, well, just not their games, but also the way that they do business, and that would be CD Projekt Red. They're pro consumer,
Right.
and I also would love Stutter Studios to be also known as a pro consumer studio, because customers are your clients. You know, without them,
Right.
you can't do what you want to do. Another game that that I think has a good model would be Stellaris. So they have frequent major updates that actually has a lot of content, but they also do paid expansions.
Right.
So I'm of the idea that it would be somewhere in that kind of realm that you know, depending upon the success of the game, if it's successful, which I really hope it is, then yeah, I would love to do a bunch of free content. I would love to do like large paid expansions as well.
Right.
And we've
Get
got a
into
bunch of
like
ideas
campaign
for that.
modes, get into like would you consider multiplay? That's pretty big for us here too. Like would you consider like multiplay
Yeah, I
feature?
would.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
would consider it.
absolutely would recommend that.
Yeah,
Playing
yeah.
against other
Look,
people.
there's look. I mean, I would love to do it.
Right. But you're one man,
Multiplayer.
like this is what I got. I really want
Yeah,
people
yeah,
to understand this. Yeah. I mean, like you're one man, you're creating like the very origin of this. You want to make sure that like you've
yeah,
got the bone, the skeleton. Like here it is. Like here's the base
yeah.
foundational start. Is this our universe? This sets the map in our universe, like Earth, Mars, Jupiter.
So it's in some random frontier
So okay,
star
gotcha.
system.
Is it
Yeah.
always the same map, or are there differing maps?
At the moment, it's just it's the same map,
Okay.
purely because well, I haven't built the actual procedural generation to actually put planets and stuff in like different
Different
positions.
spots. Okay.
Um, and for testing purposes, you don't really want to do that. Like you want
Hmm.
consistency to be able to do the same test
Right.
cases over and over
That
again.
makes sense. Right.
That's a planned. That's certainly a planned
To
feature.
spice it up in the future. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And so but there's no dedicated like electronic warfare where like you have units that have electronic warfare and can then block scans, or that recon
No.
stations can send out a pulse. Okay, okay. So these are
No,
all
but there will
ideas.
be nebula
Mhm.
and things like that, and
Okay,
also
great. I'm actually really impressed with you because like it must be very difficult starting from this point and then like all these ideas, and you have to be realistic, and you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm one man. What am I going to put in? What am I not going to put in? Like the decision making that you're doing
yeah.
right now is very important too as well. So you've got to be under the gun a little bit and thinking, okay, like what am I putting in that's going to be a feature that I think people will be attracted to, and what are the most important features that I guess are going to be what's going to get people to kind of return to the game, play the game, get interested in the game. I think that as long as my personal opinion is, as long as the AI is challenging, and the gameplay to me that we're talking about right
Fingers
now
crossed.
is enough. Well, it's enough for me like right now to stay interested in the game, to play it, you know, and to come back to it, as long as like I'm feeling like there's a challenge over and over again. I think that the AI is very important. I think that how many units right now do we have, like as far as ships?
So in game
Hmm.
compared to plan, so in game there are currently 4 civilian ships and there
Hmm.
are 5 military ships. The plan
Okay.
is to have a total roster of around about the 20 mark.
Okay.
And it's a shared ship design between every faction.
Right.
So, but that's okay.
And we plan
Um,
on like, and is that something again, like, you know, this is again where I was trying to tell my community, like, you know, in the future, will we have more variation of ship hull type,
yeah,
like design,
potentially.
right? Right.
Yeah, potentially. So, um, I guess the biggest thing to me about the ships is that, oh, you know, well, it's a very common thing for RTSs to pretty much have a wide variety of units,
Right.
but you can't change them.
Right.
Whereas in Falling Frontier, they're fully customizable.
I love it. I was just getting into it.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then once you build them, you'll be able to actually send them back in to be changed if you need to. But like everything, there is always
It's
a
a cost.
cost.
Yes.
You've got to send the ship back to a spaceport. It's got to go, like, it's actually got to dock into one of the build slots, which then means you can't build out of that build slot.
It's great.
And it takes time, and it
That's
costs
great.
money, and it
That's
costs
great.
resources.
Yes, I love
So
it.
you can do it, but you take it out of the fight, and
Right.
yeah.
It's a unit off the field. So it's
that's the risk versus
you
reward
right. You
thing.
get the reward. The ship comes back out, and it's equipped with new. You got new stuff, and it could definitely be.
But it could be too late.
A bigger threat. Right.
Yeah.
So the ship designer. This is great. You
Yeah.
just showed this to me recently. I'm going to show it here for everybody. I love customization. Like, I love the ability to actually take units and then make them a little bit more customizable. I saw that we looked at the update that you had on your channel, and we saw that there was updates, upgrades to the turret spots or the hard points, which would be like missiles. It looks like you had rail guns.
Yes.
And we also liked when the units started to fire on one another. We noticed that it didn't always appear to look like the same animation over and over again. It looked like as if it was hitting different spots of the ship, which was great. Yes. Very nice touch, man. Like, I love that. Gave it a very real kind of visceral feel that, like, different portions of the ship were getting hit.
Just like the resources, every single projectile is also physicalized, and it's simulated. So are the actual turrets. So a turret has to actually turn. The larger the turret, the slower that it turns, but the more damage that it's going to do per shot. So depending upon different, well, I won't necessarily say upgrades, but different crew and enlisted crew skills, that firing has a certain amount of accuracy. Now, it will only be a variance of a couple degrees, but a couple degrees over a long range ends up completely missing. At point blank, though, it's like every shot pretty much hits.
Yeah, right.
But
damage, does damage differ from, like, if you're closer? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, ships have hit boxes, so just like a first-person shooter, they've got hitboxes for a bridge, engines, weapons, magazine, armor plating, crew, quarters, and other components as well. The further away a ballistic is, then it's got a greater chance of actually ricocheting. So it bounces off and it can go and hit something else.
Oh, wow.
Just whether that's another ship or an asteroid.
All right, that's cool.
So even though a ship is actually shooting at, so say there's 3 targets just bearing down on a ship, and your ship is focusing fire on a single target, but not every shot's going to land on that target. It might hit the other ships. So it's completely physicalized, or it might hit one ship but then bounce off and hit a second ship.
Do we have to worry about any friendly fire? Would it hit our own ships if
no,
we were? Okay,
no.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, not good,
wasn't
but
in game.
Good. Yeah,
that wasn't game.
Yeah, like I was wondering how far we're getting into that. What about
so many people died?
What about being able to target portions of the ship? Is that in it? Is that in the game or no? I'd imagine not. No. Am I correct? Like
that's on the back end. It is coded in. So this was back when ships. So before I created the code to actually designate targets for separate turrets. So previously, turrets would just track their own, and you could tell a ship if you wanted to try to aim for the weapons magazine, if you wanted to disable the ship, or if you just wanted to go for general damage. And so the turrets would then try to target different components based upon that. But again, because of accuracy, you might hit something else.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is in game. It's currently not
Wow.
interactable with the
Okay.
player. I'm
Okay.
thinking about how I might do that. Like do you
Okay.
target a specific
Right.
turret, but then the turrets are small, so it's kind of tricky.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
there,
Because
but
we
it's not there.
okay. Okay. But it could be something that might be planned in if it was something that you heard like had a outcry from your base.
Yeah, I mean,
I get
and
what you're
also,
saying because it's so small. You kind of wonder, like, like, is it going to be something that you think is an important element to the gameplay where people want to target different portions of the ship, or is it something that you should just kind of like leave alone?
yeah, look, something that I've learned is just because, and this is a sort of design attitude I've almost certainly taken, because I've got to think about every single system
Right.
fitting together. I mean, the game's currently over 500,000 lines of code, so
Wow.
it's nowhere near the size of
Wow.
like a
Yeah.
Stellaris, and it will never
Still
be.
though, but I mean, like,
But it's
it's a
getting big.
considerable amount. Yeah.
Yeah, but just because something seems like a good idea doesn't mean it's
Doesn't mean
going
it
to
should
work
be in it.
well.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
with everything else. Like a really good example of that is like making the game fully 3D. So it's not just the X and the Z, but it's also the Y.
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of gameplay implications around that. Moving the ships is easy. That's a really easy part. But then you've got
Right.
to have tools to actually assist the player, and then you've actually got to populate the 3D space with stuff to do.
Right.
I mean, it's bad enough just on a kind of like a 2D plane. I mean, because space is big, right? So I'm gonna have to
Right.
put things like, well, I did mention nebula, radiation fields, and also a few other things. But you then imagine that on a full 3D space, then it's just that's a lot of content because
Right.
you don't like, it's got to be interesting. It just can't be dead space everywhere.
Right.
And then if it's fully 3D and it's fully populated, well, then is it over cluttered? How do you work around that? And so there's all these design challenges around that. So that's a long way to go back around to ships firing, but that's going to have to be something that I balance and test. I will probably implement it at some point, and I'll get feedback based on that. Is it something that's finicky? Is it not very intuitive? Because ultimately fun factor is king.
Right.
And I've already changed a number of designs with the game to make it more fun, because this great idea that I had just wasn't fun. It's like, well, that didn't work out, so I have to change it.
Right. You still want that
Yeah.
it's always a balance, when you're designing. It's just like, realism versus fun. You gotta like in the genre of the space sims that we're
Yeah.
getting into with Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous. We talk about this. We have this conversation a lot. Is like, how much realism do you want versus like a fun factor? And one of the systems in that genre of game is, the flight, like, and
Yes, the flight
then
model.
you get people that are ultra like realistic mode that don't want any sound because it's space and there shouldn't be sound. And then you get other people that are like, come on, I want an explosion, I want to hear the sound,
Yeah.
and so there's always this balance of like, okay, how do I make the game also fun, but how do I give it a level of realism, but then also give it like the spice that people You know, the
Exactly.
the fun
Yeah.
part. That must be a
Yeah.
difficult thing when you're a developer trying to figure out that balance. A standard RTS is just basically like, go ahead, collect whatever you want massively, create all the units that you can, splash everybody with the Zerg storm, like you know what I mean, like
Forget
and
about it.
yeah, it all becomes about like volume and numbers, and it's like very very two-dimensional in terms of gameplay. It's like massive amounts of units, just ship them over and kill somebody. And I really get tired of that kind of gameplay with my RTSs. So right now you still got me on the hook as far as the actual lineages and the amount of players, like, is it just 1 versus 1? Can you spice it up with more? Like, what do we get when we start the game?
Yeah, so at the moment it's just 1v1, but
Okay.
I don't think it's going to end up there,
Okay.
purely because space is big. So
Right.
whether or not there's sub factions, but you have like one primary main faction that you need to defeat, but there's sub factions everywhere, which like you could think of them as pirates or whatever. So it could go down that path. It could go down the path of there being multiple AI players and they could attack each other as well. But then if you've got multiple AI players of that caliber like you, then you would tend to expect some kind of diplomacy, which then takes you down that sort of
Another
rabbit
whole
hole of
like creating some type of
yeah, and look, I would love for the game to have diplomacy. I've got massive plans for that at some point, but I don't think it's going to be in the base game. I would love it to be, but it's just because I mean, you could spend
it's
months,
so layered.
months and months on that.
Easy. Yeah, I'm very interested in continuing to follow this the whole way through. Like, I really want you to succeed, and I really want this kind of gameplay. So I hope people, when watching this and they're seeing some of the answers here, aren't disappointed, because really, like, I want them to understand, hey, one man working on this project, and like, he's committed to actually putting more in, like making it deeper. Making the gameplay deeper and deeper and deeper.
I would love to. It's very, very humbling.
Yeah, that's cool. It must be
extremely humbling to get the feedback, and because this is something that as of this October I've been working on for 2 years. Been working on it full time since May last year.
That's great.
Designing it 4 years before that. So yeah, I've played enough strategy games that I would.
What's your inspiration? I mean, what's your inspiration for creating Falling Frontier?
That's a good question. So so are you wanting specific gameplay example?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind when I ask you that? Like, what was the seed in your head that was like, okay, I need to do my own thing here. I need to create this game.
So a game I really liked was a game called Conquest Frontier Wars, which I believe was a Chris Roberts game, backed by Digital Anvil, I think it was, that made it. And so that was very cool. That tried to do a big play space at the time through multiple maps. You had wormholes going to different
I'm familiar with it.
Maps. Great game. And it just there was a certain feel about the game. It didn't feel cookie cutter. It didn't feel generic. It was something new. The same way with Homeworld. Loved Homeworld.
Such a good one.
What I love about that is it just had this. There was something emotional about that game. The music, the visuals combined were just very stunning. And that sense of space.
The mothership. It was all about keeping that mothership alive. Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, it was like it was the only place you had as a home, like, connected to that ship. Yeah. And you're right. The music in that game was phenomenal. It was like that orchestral, just hooked you in right away. Yeah. Very well done. Yeah.
Other games in the space sci-fi genre would be Sins of a Solar Empire.
Yeah,
of course, you can't go Parsat.
Right.
Great game.
Yep.
Stellaris, as well. I love Stellaris. A game that's not in the space genre, but Total Annihilation. Back in the 90s. I think it was like 95, 96,
so.
or was it? Yeah, about then.
Yeah.
And that was probably the first game that I played that really married up how much a soundtrack
it was important
to a game.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
So and again, that was just new. It was something different from everything else I had played. So I guess you could say I've taken different I don't want to say features, because I don't think I've taken specific features from different games, but more a sense or a feeling that I got from each one of those games, because those have some of my fondest gaming memories in the strategy genre. So I mean, so many hours. Great games.
All of them. Yeah, good titles. Yeah, that's great. I'm rooting for you, and I know my community is, and I'm hoping that we just keep getting the word out on this title. I think you're doing a hell of a job, Todd. It's
thank you
to everything I've seen. Great, Todd. Thank you for being on the show
welcome.
today and explaining the game a bit deeper to us. And I really appreciated having you here, man. Thanks for your time.
It was great fun.
Okay,
thanks so much.
Todd.
Appreciate the time.
Stutter Fox Studios and Falling Frontier, guys. Keep it on the radar, and hopefully we can get deeper gameplay too down the road. So bye, everyone.
Sounds good. Cheers, guys.
DG360 is brought to you by our amazing patrons and YouTube membership. Become one today and get full access to monthly giveaways, the exclusive DG360 podcast, members-only posts, IRL vlogs, badges, emoticons, VIP Discord chat, and so much more. How much more? Every single member of this community is awesome. They're like family. In fact, I'm going over to their house for dinner tonight. Thank you for your support and your consideration.